Hello everyone, welcome inside the 341st episode of Newsflash. My name is Spencer Warren. Thank you so much for joining us today. Shoot 'em in the legs. Those were just some of the ideas that Trump had to handle the crisis on the border and revealed in a disturbing New York Times report we will be checking out first on today's show. Also, Rudy Giuliani has not been the nicest to Trump as of late, but still he supports him on TV. Chris Collins pleads guilty to insider trading charges. Mark Zuckerberg insults Elizabeth Warren. Botham Jean's family gets the justice they deserve. And we'll take a look at some of the Democratic fundraising numbers going out as we take a little bit of a break from the impeachment craziness going on in the show today. It's a little bit of bonus episode. Shout out to Rosh Hashanah and all the Jews celebrating the New Year. These are the reason. That's the reason why we can bring you today's show, because of course I am off from school. So it's all very nice. It frees you up a little bit more to do some good stuff, like make an episode for you guys. So that's all very good. Also, Shana Tova, I believe, is the correct phrase for all those celebrating the Jewish New Year out there. But we're going to go right into it because a very interesting story right now in the New York Times by Michael D. Shear and Julie Hirschfield Davis about what Donald Trump has been saying, painting the scene in Washington with the Oval Office meeting this past March began, as so many had, with President Trump fuming about migrants. But this time he had a solution. As White House advisors listened, astonished, he ordered them to shut down the entire 2,000-mile border with Mexico by noon the next day. The advisors feared the president's edict would trap American tourists in Mexico, strand children at schools on both sides of the border, and create an economic meltdown in the two countries. Yet, they had also known how much the president's deal to stop immigration had sent him lurching for solutions, one more extreme than the next. Privately, the president had often talked about fortifying a border wall with a water-filled trench stocked with snakes or alligators, prompting aides to seek a cost estimate. Pretty much he wanted to build like a moat, literally a moat with snakes or alligators in it. Like, I mean, you're just making the comparisons to like a 5-year-old like too easy here. Like, wow. He wanted the wall electrified with spikes on the top that could pierce human flesh. After publicly suggesting that soldiers shoot migrants if they threw rocks, the president backed off the idea when his staff told him that that was illegal. But later in the meeting, aides recalled he suggested that they shoot migrants in the legs to slow them down. No, that's not going to work either, they told them. The president was frustrated, and I think he took the moment to hit the reset button, said Thomas Homan, the guy who you see pretty much crying about how mean ICE is, how mean everyone's being to ICE on TV and mostly on Fox Business News. Yeah, he's the former ICE guy. He's a pretty big Trump guy. The president wanted to be fixed quickly, he says. Yeah, so by literally burning or by electrocuting these poor migrants. What? This electrocuted a spiked wall. Like, they can't even really build a real one. I mean, how insane is that? Yeah. So it's pretty insane. So yeah, today, as Trump is surrounded by advisors less willing to stand up to him, his threat to seal off the country from a flood of immigrants remains active. I have absolute power to shut down the border, he said in an interview this summer with New York Times. I like saying that. I have absolute power. I love that. Yeah, Trump's order to close down the border was a decision point that touched off a frenzied week of presidential rages, round-the-clock staff panic, and far more White House turmoil than what was known at the time. By the end of the week, the seat-of-the-pants president had backed off his threat, but had retaliated with the beginning of a purge of aides who would try to contain him. So pretty much what he's doing is he is going through aides, pretty much weeding out all the ones who have some modicum of sense about them, and really is what it looks like, trying to get to probably the most subservient aides who are not going to stand up to him for fear of their jobs or whatever the case might be, and pretty much just saying, just do it, whatever, just go, just do whatever you want, I don't care, like, I give up, like, and that could mean, again, filling a moat at the border with snakes and alligators. Yeah, so this article, New York Times article, is based off interviews with more than a dozen White House and administration officials involved in the events of that week in March. They were granted anonymity to describe sensitive conversations with the president and top officials in the government. in Oval Office that March afternoon. A 30-minute meeting extended to more than 2 hours as Trump's team tried to desperately placate them. You're making me look like an idiot, Trump shouted, adding in a profanity as multiple officials in the room described it. I ran on this. It's my issue. Among those in the room were Kirstjen Nielsen, out now, Homeland Security Secretary at the time, Pompeo, Kevin McAleenan, the former head of the CPB, who I believe resigned or quit, something I don't know. Stephen Miller, who, by the way, as I'm sure you know by now, the White House aide who has been more than anyone orchestrated Trump's immigration agenda. Mick Mulvaney, the acting chief of staff, was also there, along with Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, and other senior staff. Nielsen, a former aide to George W. Bush, brought in the apartment by John Kelly. So again, one of those Kelly holdovers, the people who actually have some sort of previous government experience about them. And I mean, it's really hard to distinguish who's worse, because both these, like all these guys, they would do some of the, and they did some of the most cruel stuff that we've seen in the area of immigration policy ever. Like, just because they're former Bush guys and they've had some experience in the government doesn't make them good, doesn't make them any better, doesn't make them any less humane, but at least they had some sort of boundary against them. So at least they had something holding them back in some way, shape, or form. Like, these people now, I really worry about them. So she'd always been viewed with suspicion by the president, who told aides she was a Bushie and part of the deep state, who had contributed to a group that supported Jeb Bush's presidential campaign at one point. Trump had routinely berated Nielsen as ineffective and worse, at least in his mind, not tough-looking, saying, quote, Lou Dobbs hates you and Coulter hates you. You're making me look bad. Imagine working for the president of the United States and your president calls you in the office. Is like, oh, Mr. President, what am I doing wrong? I'm so sorry. I need to improve. Well, Lou Dobbs hates you. I mean, that is something else. And Coulter hates you. Wow. Wow. The happiest he'd ever been with Nielsen is a few months earlier, when American border agents had fired tear gas into Mexico to try to stop migrants from crossing the United States. Human rights organizations condemned the move, but Trump loved it more often, though she drew the president's scorn. So, yeah, controlling those border agents. She loved her the most when he was tear gassing women and children. Like, that's when Kirstjen Nielsen really hit the spot for him. When she was out there having her border patrol agents tear gassing women and children. That's when she was top level in his mind. Like, that is the most insane. It's one of the best things I've heard. That March day, he was furious at Pompeo, too, for having cut a deal with Mexico to allow the United States to reject some asylum seekers, a plan Trump said was clearly failing. And complete shutdown of the border, Trump said, was the only way. Nielsen had tried reasoning with the president on many occasions when she stood up to him in a cabinet meeting. The previous spring, he excoriated her, and she almost resigned. Now she tried to reason with him again. We can close the border, she told the president, but it's not going to fix anything. People will still be permitted to claim asylum, because that's the way the legal system works, and that's how asylum works, and it always has worked. Yeah, Trump was unmoved. Even Kushner, who developed a relationship with Mexican officials and now sided with Nielsen, could not get through to him. All you care about is your friends in Mexico, the president snapped, according to people in the room. I've had it. I want it done at noon tomorrow. So, yeah, that's pretty. He put his foot down at that time. So the president's advisors left the meeting in a near panic. Every year, more than $200 billion worth of American exports flow across the Mexico border. Closing it would wreak havoc on American farmers and automakers. I'm sure you remember the discussion going on at the time when this was in the news. The beginning of the spring this year. Closing it would wreak havoc on American farmers, automakers, and among many others. Senator Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky, and the majority leader said in an interview at the time that a border shutdown would have a potentially catastrophic economic impact on our country, and he's obviously right. Like, it doesn't take a special guy to come and see that. That night, White House advisors succeeded in convincing the president to give them a reprieve, but only for a week until the following Friday. That gave them very little time to try and change the president's mind. They started pressuring their Mexican counterparts to rapidly increase apprehensions of migrants. Kushner and the others in the West Wing showered the president with emails proving that the Mexicans already started apprehending more migrants before they can enter the United States. Like, look, they're doing their job. It's working. It's fine. You don't need to close the border. We're doing better. We're doing better. We're doing better. Yeah, pretty much trying to seize the information flow to the president, which we all know is how you get to him, how you influence the way he thinks. Pretty much sending him articles. The White House advisors encouraged a stream of corporate executives, Republican lawmakers, and officials from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to tell Trump how damaging a border closure would be. But Miller, who, by the way, is on the other side of this, he says he's probably one of the most sickeningly far-right people in the White House, totally for closing the border. It was his view the president needed to completely overhaul the Homeland Security Department and get rid of senior officials who he believed were thwarting efforts to block immigrants. Although many of them were the president's handpicked aides, Miller told them that he'd become part of the problem by constantly citing legal hurdles. I mean, all these things with, like, laws and stuff, like, they're just getting in the way. Come on. Nielsen, who had regularly found herself a target, found herself telling Trump why he couldn't have what he wanted, was an obvious target. When the president demanded the flat back paint on the border wall, she said it would cost an additional $1 million per mile. When he ordered the wall construction sped up, she said he needed permission from property owners. Take the land, Trump would say, and let them sue us. It was his strategy, so to get 1 billion lawsuits from all these people who have land in Mexico. But when Nielsen tried to get him focused on something other than the border, the president grew impatient. During a briefing on the need for new legal authority to take down drones, Trump cut her off mid-sentence. Kristen, you didn't hear me the first time, honey, Trump said, according to people familiar with the conversation. Shoot him down, sweetheart. Just shoot him out of the sky, okay? Oh, yeah. But apparently the problem was, it's not just Nielsen. It was worse. L. Francis Cisna, the head of the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services until earlier this year, which is, I believe, the association that Ken Cuccinelli leads now. He's the guy who said these Pullman Statue of Liberty only referred to Europeans. Yeah, he's that kind of guy. So this Francis Cisna, not long for the count, I'm going to guess, he regularly pushed back on Miller's demand for a culture change at the agency, where Miller believed asylum officers were bleeding hearts too quick to extend protections to immigrants. They needed to start the opposite point of view and start turning people away. So it was pretty much any asylum seeker, just turn against them. They suck. They're most likely bad. That's the way they wanted to start things. John Mitnick, the Homeland Security General Counsel, who often raised legal concerns about Trump's immigration policies, was also on Miller's blacklist. Miller had also turned against Ronald DiViteo, a top official at the CBP whom the president had nominated to lead Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So by midweek, the campaign to change Trump's mind about the border seemed to somewhat be working. Maybe there's another way to do this, the president told Ms. Nielsen. How about if I impose tariffs on the Mexicans or threaten to impose tariffs? Tariffs are great. But the staff worried that his retreat would only be temporary. The president would never really let go of his obsessions. But they were right. On a trip to California late in the week, Trump turned to McLean with a new idea. If he wanted to stop letting migrants cross the border with no exceptions. If you get in trouble for it, Trump told them, I'll pardon you. Yeah, so pretty much close the border in all but official deed. And if you get in trouble for it, I'll pardon you. So just put up a brick wall. Don't really say that you're putting up a brick wall, but just do it. Stop them completely from coming in. So that's the take there. So once on the ground, Trump had met up with Nielsen and worked a room filled with Border Patrol agents. Start turning away migrants to the border. He told them, my message to you is keep them all out. The president said, every single one of them. The country is full. After the president left the room, McLean told the agents to ignore the president. You absolutely do not have the authority to stop processing migrants altogether, he warned.